Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News, broadcasting live from the Arabiya headquarters. These are our top stories. Real life resumes for the people of Damascus despite hundreds of Israeli airstrikes targeting Syrian military sites. Now, all eyes are on the West as the US and the UK discuss their future relationship with Syria. And celebrations in Saudi Arabia as the country is officially announced as a 2034 FIFA World Cup host. To our top story, and the Syrian people are beginning to adjust to their new lives after Assad. In Damascus, shops and banks are now open and cars and buses have returned to the streets. But whilst residents attempt to sweep up bullet cases and return to normality, Israeli troops have launched 350 airstrikes on Syria in the last 48 hours, primarily targeting military sites. HST leader Ahmed al-Sharaa has also continued to threaten those he believes are responsible for torturing prisoners under Assad, promising they will not be pardoned by his government. On his part, Syria's former Prime Minister, Mohammed al-Jalali, confirmed that the former ministers of his government were not under house arrest following the fall of Bashar al-Assad. He also added that in the last few months, he had only been in contact with the ousted president twice.
I only personally contacted Bashar al-Assad in the past 2 months for a maximum of 1.5 to 2 hours. I spoke to him on 2 occasions. Once when he gave me a task, and the other time when we were appointing ministers. After that, we had no contact. I received orders over the phone. I tried to get in touch with him last Sunday at dawn, but he didn't answer. The ministers from my government met with the transitional government to help ease the transfer of power and provide services to the Syrian people. We are not officially working. We are at home, but we are trying to facilitate the transitional process. We are not under house arrest.
Our correspondent Trent Murray has been at the Kenitra crossing on the Syrian border today, and he sent us this report.
After half a century of Assad family dictatorship and more than a decade of civil war, there's hope on the streets of Damascus.
What happened is a transition from a stage of injustice and tyranny to one of freedom and rebuilding. We pray to God to complete this victory for our people and for the Arab and Islamic world with goodness and blessings.
Following the final rebel offensive that swept away the old regime in a matter of days, some normality is creeping back into the capital. Banks have reopened, as have many shops. Queues like this one at this bakery were seen across the city as people try to buy food, medicine and essentials that remain scarce.
Truly, we have suffered from hunger, poverty and shortages, enduring a bad social and economic life. We were unaware of what was happening. Syrians only learned about it through the internet. The scenes were truly terrifying.
Faced with civil war and the murder, torture and imprisonment inflicted by the Assad regime, millions of Syrians fled from their homes. The UN estimates that 5.5 million refugees have been living in neighbouring countries. Many are now trying to return, despite the huge challenges. And while Syrians abroad work to get back home, here at the border with Israel, the IDF continues to move military assets into the demilitarised zone. That strip separating the two sides since 1974. Meanwhile, in the skies, the Israeli Air Force continues to pound hundreds of sites that it says were linked to the Assad regime's military. The Israeli military says it carried out more than 350 strikes on what it called the most strategic weapon stockpiles in Syria, claiming it did so to prevent them from falling into the hands of terrorist elements. Elsewhere, towns and cities have been destroyed by years of fighting. And while Damascus remains relatively unscathed, huge questions remain about Syria's future. For the people here, the road ahead is long and uncertain. Trent Murray for Arabiya News at the Syria-Israel border.
Staying with Syria now, as discussions with the US and UK governments have been taking place today as the West works towards a future relationship with the new look Syria. Arabiya's Washington bureau chief Nadia Bilbassi asked the US State Department how they plan to secure chemical weapons with the interim government.
It is the responsibility of those who are taking the reins of power inside Syria, first and foremost, to secure and destroy any chemical weapons that they find in areas that they control. That's the first answer to the question. And obviously you have seen HTSC's territory, and it certainly is quite possible that in the territory they've seized, there are chemical weapon stocks. They may not have full inventory of those yet, of course. They've only been in control of Damascus for a couple of days. The second answer to it, though, is that there is an emergency session of the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons Executive Council that has been called, that will meet this Thursday to address the recent developments on the ground and the current situation on the ground in Syria. And when it comes to this question of inspections and verifications, it is the responsibility of that organization to conduct verification efforts under its mandate, not any of the member states, not the United States or other states.
So that's a US stance, but how does the UK plan to work with Syria? We can now go live to London to speak to our correspondent, Olly Barratt. Olly, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Firstly, we heard from the British Prime Minister in Parliament earlier today. He said he hopes Syria was at a turning point. Tell us what else he had to say on this matter.
That's right. This was the weekly Prime Minister's questions session for Keir Starmer in the House of Commons, and he began the PMQ session by talking himself about Syria. He said that he welcomed the fall of Assad, is how he put it. He said that the people of Syria have suffered for too long under what he called his brutal regime, but he was at pains to stress a couple of times, actually, during the Prime Minister's questions session, the uncertainty about what might follow. He said initially what comes next is far from certain. He stressed that the UK has been talking to regional and global allies about trying to ensure stability to as great an extent as possible. And he talked about the need for what he called a political solution that protects civilians and minorities and rejects terrorism and violence. He was also asked about Syria later on in the session and described it as a very serious moment, but then talked about it being, as you say, a much needed turning point, which he says is by no means guaranteed. He says that what comes next needs to be peaceful, political, and a rejection of terrorism and violence. So really, Keir Starmer, the UK Prime Minister today, trying to strike a note of optimism, but certainly cautious optimism about the days ahead for Syria.
Olly, the UK has also been discussing removing HTS as a named terror organisation. Could this happen, and what considerations would have to be in place first? As you said, cautious optimism from the Prime Minister.
It absolutely could happen. There's been a little bit of a lack of clarity, I think it's fair to say, from the UK government about exactly how quickly it might happen. Earlier this week, Pat McFadden, a senior cabinet minister at the top of Keir Starmer's government, was saying that this was something that was under review and that a decision would come quickly. Later the same day, Keir Starmer himself was saying that while this would be reviewed, that this wouldn't be a decision that would happen rapidly, and that several different circumstances would have to be considered when it comes to working out exactly what might come next and whether this prescription would need to be removed and how quickly it could be removed as well. And then we had clarification from Downing Street earlier in the week on the issue of what a prescription actually means when it comes to contact with an organisation that is a prescribed terrorist group. And number 10, the Office of the Prime Minister was making it clear that it is still possible for the UK government to have contacts with HTS or figures allied to it, even while it remains a prescribed terrorist organisation. But clearly that is under review, and exactly how that unfolds over the days, if not weeks ahead, is still far from clear when it comes to the UK government's perspective.
Many European countries, including the UK, are actually pausing visa applications for Syrians. I really want to know, what does this mean for the people who have made Europe their home?
Well, here in the UK, we've had some statements on this issue today from the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, who deals with border security and oversees things like asylum applications as well. And she's been explaining the reason for the UK's pause in applications from Syrian people. And she says that really it's because the vast majority of people making applications in this country who are Syrian are doing so saying that they are fleeing the regime of Bashar al-Assad. Well, she says that that is a situation that has simply flipped in recent days. There is clearly a huge change in circumstances inside Syria, and so therefore many of those applications that were either being considered or about to be considered have to be looked at in a different way. Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, says we simply do not know how events are going to play out in Syria, and so that's why applications have been paused in this country. Clearly, for people who've already had successful applications, they will be able to remain in Britain. But other European countries have been taking similar measures as well. We've also seen some slightly different stances too from countries like Austria, with the Interior Minister there, Gerhard Körner, saying that he's instructed the ministry to prepare an orderly return and what he called deportation programme to Syria. That is a comment that's been worrying some refugee and rights organisations with regards to what that might mean exactly in Austria. And bringing it back here to the UK, the other thing that the Home Secretary has been saying, Yvette Cooper here, the Interior Minister, is that she has been seeing, like many other countries have been, some Syrians deciding that now is the time to return voluntarily to Syria, to return home, given what's unfolded in Syria in recent days. But she also urges a note of caution. She says we've seen initial signs of people wanting to return home, but she says it's very unstable at the moment and we need to approach this with care and monitoring the detail of what is happening.
Olly Barratt in London, thank you very much for joining us this evening. To Saudi Arabia now, where the country has been celebrating the news of the country's successful bid to host the 2034 FIFA World Cup. The country's sports minister, Prince Abdulaziz Al Faisal, has said it will be an exceptional event. Here's how the announcement was made.
The host of the FIFA World Cup 2034 will be Saudi Arabia.
For more on this, I'm joined by Al-Arabiya's English sports reporter, that's Mark Lomas. Mark, thanks so much for joining us today. We've known about this bid for a while. Tell us what we can expect from the 2034 World Cup in Saudi, and where could the Games be held?
Well, according to those behind the bid, it's going to be the best World Cup we've ever seen. Obviously, they do have to say that, but there's a lot of excitement in Saudi Arabia about the 2034 World Cup being hosted there. It's, as you said, it's been a year that we've kind of known it. Saudi Arabia is unopposed, but this is going to be an incredible event. I don't think that anything like it will have been seen before in Saudi Arabia. They have time to kind of get ready. We have 10 years, including the 2027 AFC Asian Cup, which will be taking place in Saudi Arabia. But yeah, huge news for the kingdom. It's a football-mad country, Saudi Arabia. You know, anybody who's been there understands the love and the passion that the fans have for football. And there'll be 15 stadiums, 5 host cities, 11 brand new stadiums across Riyadh, Kabul, Abba, Neom, Jeddah as well. So it's going to be some state-of-the-art facilities as well that the World Cup is going to take place in.
Mark, you just basically said football is so massive in the country. Cristiano Ronaldo plays in the Saudi League. Saudi Arabian owners at Newcastle United. Has the country always been this passionate about the sport?
Absolutely. As I said, I feel like if anyone has visited Saudi Arabia, within seconds you'll be having a conversation about somebody, about football with somebody. I've been lucky enough to go to several matches in the kingdom. I was at the Riyadh Derby last year, 55,000 people watching Al Hilal versus Al Nassr. Incredible atmosphere. The Saudi Pro League has been around for 50 years. The King's Cup is almost 70 years old now. This is a real football culture, football heritage. It exists in Saudi Arabia. And yes, Ronaldo, Benzema, Neymar have helped kind of bring it to more kind of global recognition, I guess. But Saudi Arabia has always been crazy about football, and it is a very, very suitable place to host the FIFA World Cup because of that passion of the fans. 80% of people in Saudi Arabia either play or are engaged in football. So it's a huge number. And as I said, all you have to do is to have a conversation with any Saudi to understand the passion that's there for football.
You know, we saw the World Cup in Qatar was scheduled for the wintertime because it is extremely hot during the summer. Will something similar happen for Saudi? Do we know?
Absolutely. So as part of the bid process, Saudi Arabia's bid was praised. It's scored the highest score that there's ever been in a World Cup bid process, which is something to be celebrated. But, you know, it was very clearly mentioned that summer is off limits again. You know, we know how hot it gets in the kingdom at that time of year. So I think we will see a Winter World Cup again. It will cause some consternation, I think, around some of the leagues around the world. But yeah, we're still not sure exactly what month it'll happen in. I know that November to December is due to be Ramadan in 2034. So, but World Cups have previously taken place during Ramadan as well. So yeah, it remains to be seen. January could also be an option. October to November perhaps might work as well. But all of these things still need to be decided. There's a decade still to decide on these things.
Yes, I was trying to figure out how old I'll be in that next 10 years. But the country, as we say, got this 10 years to prepare for the tournament. Just basically in 60 seconds, tell me what the main things will be that they're working on.
I mean, building the stadiums is going to be a huge, huge undertaking. There's some, as I said, some fantastic looking stadiums in terms of the architectural design, but it's going to take a lot of work. Another big thing is on the pitch as well. You know, Saudi Arabia want to be competitive at the 2034 World Cup. We've seen a couple of host nations fail to get through the group stage, including Qatar last time, including South Africa. Saudi Arabia do not want to be amongst those names as well. So at the moment, the coach is Barratt, the Frenchman, and he's going to be trying to improve the team. It's going to be amazing because there's lots of teenagers. Think about young Saudis now who will have the potential to represent their country in a home World Cup in 2034. So getting things right on the pitch is going to be really important for Saudi Arabia. Obviously, lots of infrastructure work to be done off it as well. Also, I think a lot of PR work to be done as well. You know, not everyone has supported the bid worldwide. I think it's important to note that. But there is time on the side for people to be shown more about Saudi football culture and Saudi football heritage. Yeah, I think there's great opportunities there to kind of open Saudi Arabia up to new audience. And yeah, these are the big important things that needs to be done over the next 10 years. Team, infrastructure, and a good PR campaign as well.
Our sports reporter there, Mark Lomas, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure.
Let's take a look at some of the other stories making headlines today. The family of US journalist Austin Tice, held captive in Syria for the last 12 years, are hopeful he can be returned home in the wake of Assad's fall. Tice is thought to have been captured close to Damascus in August 2012 while covering the Syrian civil war. His relatives say they have never given up hope of his return. Donald Trump has taken a light jab at his Canadian counterpart, referring to Justin Trudeau as the governor of the great state of Canada. In a social media post, the US president-elect referenced a dinner the pair had last month at Mar-a-Lago. Trudeau travelled to meet Trump following his threat to impose a blanket 25% tariff on Canadian goods when he takes office in January. Ukraine has been awarded $20 billion from the US, funded by profits seized profits of seized Russian assets. The economic support forms a significant part of a $15 billion package agreed by G7 nations, which was announced in June. This comes a matter of weeks before US President Joe Biden is replaced by Donald Trump, who says he wants to end the war in Ukraine quickly. Germany's Chancellor Olaf Scholz will submit a request to Parliament today to hold a vote of confidence following the collapse of his coalition. Scholz is expected to lose the vote, which is set to take place next week, as his government no longer has a majority. He must then request the president to dissolve Parliament, which will trigger new elections. And Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni has been named Europe's most powerful person by Politico. The political newspaper says the Italian leader has gone from being dismissed as an ultra-nationalist kook to establishing herself as a figure with whom Brussels and now Washington can do business. The suspect behind the killing of a healthcare CEO shot in New York City last week is challenging extradition charges from Pennsylvania. Luigi Mangio has been in court in the district where he was discovered after being recognized by a McDonald's employee. Caroline Malone has more.
It took police 5 days to track down the murder suspect, but in less time, Luigi Mangione has become notorious online, with many people expressing support for his apparent cause and criticism of the health insurance industry.
That's completely out of touch and an insult to the intelligence of the American people and lived experience.
The 26-year-old was found with a manifesto on him, which has been released online and confirmed by law enforcement to say, frankly, these parasites simply had it coming. A reminder, the US has the #1 most expensive healthcare system in the world, yet we rank roughly number 42 in life expectancy. Mangione's lawyer confirmed he is fighting extradition to New York, where he would face manslaughter charges.
If you're an American, you believe in the American criminal justice system, you have to presume him to be innocent. And none of us would want anything other than that if that were us in those shoes.
When police detained Mangione, he had a ghost gun, thought to be 3D printed, and fake IDs on him, and he faces gun and forgery charges in Pennsylvania. Police say they're doing what they can to expedite the extradition process to New York as well.
We're going to do what's necessary to get the governor's warrant, and we're working, with the New York City Police Department and Manhattan DA's office, and we're going to get the defendant up there so they can prosecute him on their charges.
Mangione's X page had a banner that included an X-ray of a back. People who know him have since confirmed he had chronic back pain and underwent spinal surgery. His social media accounts also suggest his family and friends had lost touch with him after that. A statement from the Mangione family says they are shocked and devastated. There's also been an outpouring of support on social media for Mangione and his apparent campaign against the health industry, and a deluge of merchandise being sold online, including T-shirts printed with the same words that were found etched onto the bullet casings found at the scene: deny, defend, depose, known criticism of the insurance industry. There have even been reviews posted about McDonald's, where he was identified by an employee, leading police to him. Some warning people not to go there as there are, quote, rats in the kitchen. The legal journey for Luigi Mangione is likely to be a lengthy process. And while investigators continue to retrace his steps, online an unusual fan club of sorts defends and even glorifies him. Caroline Malone, Al-Arabiya News, Washington.
Let's take you through the top business news. The sale of Alex Jones's InfoWar website to parody news platform The Onion has been rejected by a US bankruptcy judge. The court ruled an auction for the InfoWars did not result in the best bids possible after The Onion used funds from families of the victims of the Sandy Hook massacre, who won a defamation lawsuit against Jones. General Motors has revealed it will stop funding the development of the Cruise self-driving taxi. The car manufacturer says it will now refocus autonomous driving development on personal vehicles and made reference to the competitive robo-taxi market. The company behind fashion giant Zara has reported a quarterly fall in sales and profit today. Shares in Inditex fell around 5% and sales dropped to 9.36 billion euros, below the 9.51 expected by analysts. Turning to sports now, and world number one Scottie Scheffler has matched Tiger Woods' record by becoming the second man to win the PGA Tour Player of the Year award in 3 consecutive seasons. The 28-year-old American accepted his third Jack Nicklaus Award after winning 91% of the vote from his fellow players. And Manchester United are reportedly willing to sell forward Marcus Rashford in the new year. The 27-year-old has scored 138 times for United since starting his career. But this season, he's only netted 4 Premier League goals and has been given a disciplinary from the club. But let's return to the biggest sports story of the day. Saudi Arabia has won the bid for the 2034 FIFA World Cup. The country will provide 15 venues for the tournament, 11 of which will be brand new. 8 will take place in the capital Riyadh, 4 in Jeddah, and 1 each in Al-Khabar and Abba, as well as 1 in the brand new desert city of Neom. Let's get the reaction of football presenter and podcast host Peter Redding, who joins me now. Peter, thank you so much. First of all, futuristic cliff, top venue built 300 metres above the ground, and multiple new football stadiums. This is all part of the plans underway in Saudi as they prepare for the World Cup. How will they accomplish these vast, extensive plans?
I think they will. I mean, first of all, congratulations to the kingdom, because it's just a fantastic, it's brilliant news for the MENA region and football fans as well. And I think it's fair to add that, you know, there'll be extreme confidence given the fact of all the international sports events that have been held there just recently. You've got boxing, you've got golf, you've got the F1, and I don't think football is going to be any different. Looking at them, I'm excited by the plans of the stadiums, I have to say, and some of the capacities as well. I mean, you're talking about 96,000 fans in the main stadium for a World Cup. I mean, what could be better?
Watching it could be better, maybe, Peter. I'm not so sure. I just wanted to go back to something you said there. When it comes to sports, Saudi's influence has really been growing. We've seen this with Live Golf. You mentioned the boxing titles too. So how important is this World Cup for Saudi on a global stage?
I mean, it's absolutely important. I mean, it's more than that. I mean, it fits in with the vision as well, but taking that sports angle as well, and it's something that has been touched on previously in the show as well by Mark, is the fact that Saudi, they have a very, very strong football fabric. It's been there for years, and it's just because the eyes of the world have turned on Saudi lately with the Saudi Pro League and all of the great players and talent that they're encouraging, that you know, the eyes and the focus have turned there. They're a football nation. They're as fervent as anyone, their fans. So I think it's an absolutely brilliant move, and I know, being in the MENA region, how excited all of the fans are. Passionate is an understatement.
But how will the 2034 World Cup work for football? You know, what kind of impact will it have on the calendar?
Well, look, I mean, at the end of the day, we were just talking about this in the studio not so long ago, that whatever happens on the international front, the domestic clubs, they tend to see it as a hindrance. But, you know, things like domestic cup finals and then a World Cup final as well, they're the pinnacle of players' careers. So player power will win. But as Mark said previously, it all depends on the month. And then, of course, your domestic managers around the globe have got to get into the probability and acceptance of when they're going to lose their key players, when the World Cup's going to be, when there's going to be a break in the season. But look, at the end of the day, the World Cup is the World Cup. It's the number one event on the planet, and rightly so, it will take precedence.
Football presenter and podcast host there, Peter Redding. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
A reminder of our top stories. Real life resumes for the people of Damascus despite hundreds of Israeli airstrikes targeting Syrian military sites. Now all eyes are on the West and the US and UK as they discuss their future relationship with Syria. And celebrations in Saudi Arabia as the country is officially announced as the 2034 FIFA World Cup host. That's all from us on W News. Thank you so much for joining us. Riz Khan, he's coming up next. And don't miss Tom Burgess-Watson with GNT. Good night.